It was supposed to be a normal Monday morning at Tandeka Holdings in Cape Town. The quarterly meeting was always a big deal. Everyone from interns to executives packed into the glass-walled auditorium, dressed sharp and nervous. I'd been there 9 years, working my way up to senior operations analyst. I knew the company inside out. That morning, I sat near the front, notebook in hand, thinking about my next project and how far I'd come. Then the CEO, Mr. Thembenkube, walked on stage. He had that confident smile he always wore when he was about to show off. But this time, something felt different. He started talking about accountability and dead weight. His tone got sharper. And then, in front of 700 employees, he pointed straight at me. "This," he said, voice booming through the microphone, "is what useless looks like." The room went silent. My chest tightened. I could feel every eye on me. Some people looked away. A few laughed under their breath, trying to hide it. I wanted to disappear. Then, without warning, he said I was fired, on the spot. No meeting, no explanation, no chance to defend myself. Security came up to escort me out while he stood there, smirking. As I walked through the hall, people avoided my eyes. The same people I'd helped for years now acted like they didn't know me. By the time I stepped out of the building, all I had left was my briefcase, my pride in pieces, and the echo of his words still ringing in my head. That day, I didn't just lose my job. I lost my dignity, in front of everyone. But what I didn't know yet was that humiliation can be the start of something powerful. The weeks after I got fired felt like I was trapped underwater. I'd wake up late, stare at the ceiling, and wonder how everything fell apart so fast. 9 years of loyalty, gone in a few minutes of public shame. My phone stopped ringing. The world moved on, but I couldn't. I was angry, embarrassed, and broke. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. "This is what useless looks like." Zanil, my wife, tried to help me hold it together. She'd make tea, sit next to me, and say, "Saifo, you're better than this. Don't let that man define you." But it didn't help much. I'd snap over small things, then apologize. I hated myself for it. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring at the dark, replaying that day over and over. The laughter, the whispers, the walk of shame out of that building. Bills started piling up. My savings were running low. I even considered applying for entry-level jobs just to keep us afloat, but something in me refused. I wasn't just angry. I was humiliated. And humiliation, if you sit with it long enough, turns into something else. One morning, while scrolling through the news on my phone, I saw the headline, "Tandeka Holdings to finalize $5.1 billion merger with Global Corp." My heart started pounding. That same company, the one that tossed me out like garbage, was about to make billions. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight, and something in me shifted. I knew their system inside out. I had designed parts of it, the analytics network that powered their entire operation. I knew where the data lived, how it moved, and more importantly, what they didn't want anyone to see. I remembered late nights working on compliance reports, merger drafts, internal audits. I'd done the work that made this deal possible. That morning, I didn't just feel angry anymore. I felt awake. I started thinking back to all the things I'd seen while working there. Strange numbers that didn't add up, reports that got revised before being sent out, environmental audits that looked a little too perfect. At the time, I didn't question it. I was just doing my job. But now, it all started to make sense. Zanil noticed the change in me that day. She asked, "What's going on in that head of yours?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Just thinking," I said. "Maybe it's time to remind them who they called useless." I didn't have a plan yet, but I had something stronger, a reason. They had taken my dignity in front of everyone. Now, I was going to take something from them, not out of revenge, but because the truth was buried in that company, and I was the only one who knew where to dig. And I was done being quiet. One rainy afternoon, I was digging through my old backup drives, trying to delete files I no longer needed. It was mostly habit, something to make me feel productive again. I hadn't looked at those drives since before everything fell apart. They were full of spreadsheets, project notes, and company data from my years at Tandeka Holdings. I clicked through folder after folder, half curious, half nostalgic, remembering how much effort I had poured into that place. Then something caught my eye, an old set of reports labeled merger_confidential_. I almost ignored them, but curiosity won. I opened the files and started scrolling through the document. There were transaction chains, environmental assessments, internal audit records, all stuff I had helped prepare before I was fired. I knew these files like the back of my hand, but as I read through them, something started to feel off. In one of the environmental compliance reports, the carbon emission numbers didn't match the raw data I remembered collecting. The figures were cleaner, too clean. I pulled up an older version from another backup, one I'd saved before the final edit. The difference was obvious. The company had changed the data to make it look like Tandeka was far more green and sustainable than it actually was. My pulse started to race. I double-checked other files, cross-referencing numbers and timestamp. It was all there, proof that someone had deliberately falsified environmental data to impress Global Corp and pass international sustainability checks. They had lied to make billions. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or curse. All those years, I'd thought Tandeka's success was built on hard work and innovation. Turns out, it was built on fraud and deception. The irony hit me hard. The same company that called me useless had been using lies to keep its image spotless. If the international auditors ever got hold of this, the entire merger would fall apart instantly. The fraud was clear, undeniable, and traceable. And the best part? The trail led straight to the top, to the executives who had signed off on those clean reports. I sat there in silence, my heart pounding. The rain kept tapping against the window, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: power. For the first time since that humiliating day, the shame started to fade. In its place came a slow, steady calm. I copied the files to a new folder, encrypted them, and labeled it Truth. Then I closed my laptop, leaned back, and smiled. For weeks, I'd been drowning in anger and helplessness. But now I had something real, proof that the people who crushed me had built their empire on lies. They thought I was done. They thought they'd broken me. But what I had just discovered was the beginning of something much bigger. The night I found the proof, I barely slept. My mind was racing, not with anger this time, but with ideas. I knew what I could destroy Tandeka Holdings completely, but I didn't want to make a reckless move. I needed someone smart, someone who knew how to handle the truth the right way. That's when I thought of Lorado. Lorado and I had known each other for years. She was an investigative journalist with a reputation for exposing corruption in high places. Fearless, sharp, and brutally honest. I sent her a message. I have something you'll want to see. It's about Tandeka. She replied almost instantly. I'm listening. We met the next day at a quiet cafe and observatory, away from the city buzz. I brought my laptop, opened the files, and showed her everything. The falsified carbon data, the doctored reports, the internal emails that hinted at a cover-up. She scrolled through the documents slowly, her face changing from curiosity to disbelief. Sifo, she said softly. If this is true, Tandeka will be done. This could be one of the biggest corporate scandals in years. I nodded, but I wasn't smiling. I don't want to destroy them, Lorado, I said. I want justice. I want the truth out there. They took everything from me in front of the whole company. I just want my dignity back. She sat back, thinking. Then we do this right, she said. If we drop this now, they'll find a way to bury it. We need timing, strategy, and impact. We spent hours at that table, planning. The cafe staff must have refilled our coffee cups 5 times. By the end of the meeting, we had a clear plan. We'd leak the evidence at the exact moment it would hurt Tandeka the most, on the day the merger with Global Corp was to be signed. That was 2 months away. 2 long months of silence, waiting, and watching. Lorado started quietly connecting with her network, international journalists, watchdog organizations, environmental experts. She made sure the data would reach the right hands when the time came. I, on the other hand, went back into the shadows. I reviewed every file again and again, cleaning the metadata, tracing digital fingerprints, making sure the proof was bulletproof. We spoke only through encrypted messages and burner phones. Every time I sent her something new, I felt a rush of both fear and satisfaction. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also freeing. For the first time, I was no longer powerless. As the merger date drew closer, Tandeka's name filled the news. Africa's biggest corporate success story, they called it. Watching Thembancube's smiling face on TV made my blood boil, but I kept my calm. Let him celebrate. Let him believe he had won. Because when that pen touched the paper, when the cameras flashed and the world was watching, that's when the truth would explode. And this time, I'd be the one smiling. When Tandeka started celebrating, the whole city seemed to join in. Press briefings, glossy brochures, smiling faces on every news channel. I watched it all and felt a cold kind of calm. I knew a lot more than they thought I did. I also knew they had left doors open, old accounts, forgotten folders, sloppy processes they never bothered to lock down after firing me. I did not go into detail. I only used the access I already had and looked where the light of their headlines could not reach. I spent weeks piecing together whatever I could find, not by inventing anything, but by following trails they left behind. Archived emails that had been moved, audit drafts that had been stored in the wrong place, digital receipts that contradicted official certificates. Names kept appearing in the margins, the same executives who smiled in glossy press shots. I saw transactions that didn't add up and approvals that had no sign-off. It was messy and ugly and completely telltale. I told Lorado what I was seeing and she moved fast. Her role was critical. She handled the outside world, the timing, and the safety net. She made calls to trusted journalists, whispered to environmental watchdogs, and lined up experts who could verify the documents without being seduced by headlines. We created a plan to distribute proof so it could not be quietly buried, redundant channels, independent verifications, and people ready to publish the moment everything matched. She also insisted on strict operational security. No email chains that could be traced back, no loose talk in public. We kept everything compartmentalized. I remember nights hunched over my laptop, coffee gone cold, pixel after pixel of evidence turning into a clear picture. It was a strange feeling to be the one unearthing the rot in a place I used to care about. Part of me ached, for the company I helped build, for co-workers who were probably unaware of what was happening above them. But another part was steady. The humiliation I had felt was changing into something else: purpose. We tested the release strategy with small probes, sending small blocks of data to analysts to confirm authenticity, asking a couple of former colleagues questions that sounded casual but were carefully chosen. Each confirmation made the whole case stronger. Lorado coordinated with editors in different time zones so the story would break everywhere at once. That simultaneity was important. If it hit only in one place, Tandeka's PR team could spin or delay. If it hit everywhere, there would be no hiding. The day of the signing felt like being back at the quarterly meeting, but with the roles reversed. Cameras, suits, and the same confident faces. I did not go inside. I stayed across the street with a cheap coffee, watching blinds lift and people smile for the cameras. My phone buzzed with encrypted messages from Lorado. Ready? Yes. Now. The first headlines started to roll across my feed, and the noise swelled. Journalists posting documents, watchdogs tweeting preliminary findings, and analysts asking sharp questions. I watched as confusion spread through the crowd inside the hall. Faces that had been fixed in celebration began to lose shape. Security guards looked around. People whispered. And there, through the glass, I saw him, Mr. Nkyub, still composed for a beat, and then the mask slipped. It was quiet, sharp, and final. I walked away without cheering. I did not need to. The trap we set was not about spectacle. It was about making sure the truth could not be dressed up and paraded as progress. Standing across the street, I felt surplus of something I had not felt since they pointed at me: control. The big day finally arrived, the one Tandeka Holdings had been building up to for months. The air in Cape Town felt charged, like before a storm. Every major news channel covered the event. The company's headquarters was decorated with banners, glass doors polished, and security everywhere. Inside the main hall, the stage gleamed with Tandeka and Global Corp logos side by side. The world was about to witness a $5.1 billion merger, the largest in the company's history. I stood across the street, wearing a simple jacket, a cup of coffee in hand, blending in with the crowd of curious onlookers and reporters who didn't get press passes. From where I was, I could see the live broadcast playing on the big screen in the lobby. Mr. Themba Nkyub walked on stage, dressed in his usual tailored suit, that smug smile still plastered on his face. The audience clapped like he was royalty. Cameras flashed. Everyone looked proud. Everyone except me. As Nkyub lifted the pen to sign the final merger papers, everything started to unfold. My phone buzzed once, then again, then nonstop. The first alert came from BBC Africa, then Reuters, then Al Jazeera. One headline after another exploded across the internet. Tandeka Holdings accused of falsifying environmental data. Global Corp merger halted amid fraud investigation. Leaked documents reveal massive corporate cover-up. Inside the hall, the giant LED screens behind the stage suddenly switched to breaking news feed. At first, people thought it was part of the presentation, until the words "Tandeka Holdings under investigation for fraudulent reporting and corruption" filled the screen in bold red letters. The room went silent. The sound of cameras clicking stopped. You could almost hear people's hearts drop. Nkyub froze mid-signature. His hand trembled slightly before he dropped the pen. His face, usually so controlled, turned pale. He looked around as if the floor had been pulled out from under him. Executives whispered to each other. Phones started ringing everywhere, and security rushed toward the stage. Investors in the front rows began getting the same news alerts. Some stood up, others started calling their offices. Reporters outside the hall caught wind of the chaos and began shouting questions. The polished event that was supposed to mark Tandeka's greatest victory had turned into a disaster broadcast live around. From across the street, I watched it all unfold in real time. Lorado messaged me. "It's out. They can't stop it." I didn't reply. I just kept watching as the proud empire that had humiliated me was being stripped bare in front of the same kind of audience that once laughed at me. I felt my phone vibrating nonstop. Friends, journalists, even former coworkers were all calling. But I didn't answer. I just slipped the phone into my pocket, took one last look at the chaos inside, and started walking away. There was no need to celebrate. The truth was loud enough on its own. Justice had finally arrived, quietly, precisely, and in front of everyone who once watched me fall. Within 24 hours, Tandeka Holdings went from being the pride of South African business to the biggest scandal in the country. The news spread like wildfire. By that evening, every major network was talking about the leaked reports, the fake environmental data, and the millions tied to corrupt contracts. Investors pulled out faster than anyone could react. Tandeka's stock price crashed by 70% in a single day. The same people who once bragged about working there were suddenly deleting the company name from their profiles. By the next morning, government investigators showed up at Tandeka's head office with search warrants. Cameras caught the moment they walked in: boxes, flash drives, stacks of paper being carried out. The board of directors called an emergency meeting that lasted all night. By sunrise, they had no choice but to suspend Themba Nkuba indefinitely, pending investigation. His confident smile was gone. In the photos that hit the news later, he looked 10 years older. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old colleagues who once avoided me were suddenly calling to check in. Some were curious. Others wanted to know if I had anything to do with the leaks. Journalists reached out from London, Nairobi, and Lagos. Even a few corporate rivals sent polite messages like, "Impressive timing." I didn't reply to most of them. I wasn't looking for fame or interview. I just wanted peace. At home, Zanil watched the news with me, her eyes wide as the story unfolded. "You really did this?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. I just smiled, sipped my tea, and said, "Some storms clean the air." She laughed quietly, shaking her head, half proud, half shocked. Over the next few days, the fallout kept growing. Tandeka's offices in Johannesburg and Nairobi were raided too. Former employees started coming forward with their own stories: unpaid bonuses, shady deals, missing audit trails. The company that once looked invincible was now being picked apart by every watchdog and reporter in Africa. Then, a week later, Lerado's article dropped. It was everywhere, shared thousands of times on social media, quoted on talk shows, and discussed on podcasts. She wrote with precision, naming names, showing timelines, and attaching verified documents. Her headline read, "The Billion-Dollar Lie, Inside Tandeka's Greenwashing Empire." But what caught everyone's attention was the line near the end. Sources close to the investigation credit an anonymous insider for exposing the truth. Anonymous. That one word said everything. No one needed to know it was me. That night, as I sat on the balcony with Zanil, watching the city lights flicker, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The man they had called useless had quietly pulled down a giant, and no one could take that away. I didn't celebrate. I didn't brag. I just breathed. Because sometimes justice doesn't need to be loud. It only needs to be true. A few weeks after the scandal broke, life slowly started to feel normal again, or at least calmer. The chaos had shifted from my world to Tandeka's. Every day there was a new headline: arrests, lawsuits, resignations. I watched it all quietly from home, still half in disbelief that it was over. Then one morning, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. It was from Global Corp, the same multinational giant Tandeka had been trying to merge with. At first, I thought it was spam. I almost deleted it. But when I saw the official signature and company seal, I opened it. The message was short and formal, but it stopped me in my tracks. "We would like to discuss a senior compliance position within our African operations. Your recent work has caught our attention." I read it twice, then a third time, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Global Corp, the company Tandeka had wanted to impress, was now reaching out to me. Me, the man they'd called useless. We set up a video meeting later that week. Their regional director joined the call, along with a few executives. They were professional but warm. One of them said, "Mr. Mbeel, the integrity and precision in your whistleblowing documentation were exceptional. We could use someone like you to lead our compliance efforts in Southern Africa." I didn't say much at first. Honestly, I was still processing it. But when they mentioned the title, Regional Compliance Director, and the salary package, I had to lean back in my chair. It wasn't just a job. It was recognition. It was redemption. When I told Zanil that evening, she stared at me for a moment, then burst into tears. "You didn't just get even," she said, her voice trembling. "You got free." I hugged her, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. It felt like the world had come full circle. News about my new role spread quickly. This time, my name wasn't whispered in office gossip or attached to shame. It was in business columns and leadership blogs. The man who exposed a billion-dollar fraud now leads corporate ethics for Global Corp Africa. Reporters wanted interviews, but I turned most of them down. I didn't want fame. I just wanted to work, quietly, and prove that dignity doesn't die with humiliation. When I walked into Global Corp's Cape Town office on my first day, the receptionist greeted me with a smile and said, "Welcome aboard, Mr. Mbeel." I nodded, feeling something heavy lift off my shoulders. The same city where I had once walked out in shame was now where I was walking back in with my head held high. Later that evening, I sat by the window of my new office, watching the sun sink behind Table Mountain. I thought about that day on stage, the laughter, the humiliation, and how it had all led me here. Sometimes, life doesn't give you revenge. It gives you redemption, which is worth far more. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I was free. Months passed, and the world moved on, but Tandeka Holdings didn't survive the storm. One headline after another told the story of their fall. Lawsuits piling up, investors fleeing, and partners cutting ties. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Tandeka Holdings files for bankruptcy. The company that once stood as a symbol of power and pride had crumbled to dust. I read the news quietly one morning in my office at Global Corp. No celebration, no smile, just a quiet moment of reflection. I remembered the faces from that auditorium, the laughter, the humiliation. Now, it all felt far away, like something that had happened to someone else. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a business summit in Johannesburg. It was one of those high-profile events where industry leaders discussed ethics, innovation, and the future of corporate Africa. I went mostly to share what I'd learned about integrity and accountability. It felt like the right full-circle moment. The hall was packed, hundreds of business leaders, investors, and journalists. I sat near the front, flipping through the program while waiting for my turn to speak. Then I saw a name that made me pause. Keynote speaker, Themba Nkubi, founder and CEO of Nubra Solutions. I almost laughed. The once untouchable CEO of Tandeka Holdings was now trying to sell a new startup. When he walked onto the stage, I barely recognized him. The man who used to dominate every room now looked older, thinner, his hair graying at the edges. He tried to speak with confidence, but his voice wavered slightly. You could see the nerves in the way he adjusted his tie and fumbled with his notes. He started his presentation, talking about new beginnings and resilience. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same man who had publicly destroyed me was now standing there, desperate to be taken seriously again. Then, in the middle of his talk, his eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me. For a second, he froze. The words stopped coming. I didn't move, just sat there, calm and composed, a faint smile on my face. I raised my glass slightly, met his eyes, and mouthed one simple word: useless. His expression shifted instantly. His eyes darted away, his voice stumbled, and for a moment he looked small, like a man who had finally realized what it feels like to be on the other side of humiliation. The audience didn't notice what had just passed between us, but I did. It wasn't revenge that filled me, it was closure. That single moment, that quiet exchange, made every sleepless night, every painful memory worth it. After his talk ended, I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything without saying a word. As I walked out of the hall, I felt lighter than I had in years. Life has a strange way of circling back. The man who once tore me down in public now had to face me in the same kind of room. And this time, the power was mine. Years have passed since that dark chapter of my life, and everything feels different now. I no longer chase revenge or recognition. Instead, I spend my time mentoring young professionals across Africa, people who remind me of who I once was, hardworking, hopeful, and sometimes too trusting of those in power. I teach them about dignity, courage, and ethics in the workplace, the things no textbook ever prepares you for. When I speak to them, I always say, never let anyone define your worth through humiliation. Let your silence and discipline build your power. I can see it in their eyes when those words hit home. Many of them have faced bosses who made them feel small, leaders who mistook kindness for weakness. I tell them that real strength isn't in shouting or fighting back in the moment. It's in holding your truth until the world is ready to hear it. Looking back, I realized the merger that was meant to make Themba Nkubi rich ended up being the lesson that rebuilt my entire life. Losing that job was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and the best. It stripped me down, forced me to rebuild not just my career, but my sense of self. Now, when people talk about the Tandeka scandal, they see it as a turning point in corporate accountability across Africa. But for me, it's more personal. It's proof that one person's courage can outlast an empire of lies. Sometimes revenge isn't about shouting louder than those who hurt you. It's about standing quietly, knowing the truth is on your side, and watching as that truth, once revealed, becomes powerful enough to crush billions.